Hey dude, what's up? Evan from Stock Music Musician, and today I've got a beat making tutorial. This works in Reason, but this will work in any DAW. This is really how to take your drum programming to the next level, to turn a simple beat like this, into something that's going to hit a lot harder like this. And that's without using any plugins at all. That's just by spending a little more time thinking about your your samples, your sound design, and your programming. This is before you do fancy things like EQ, compression, anything, before you spend a dime on a plugin. So stay tuned for this video and learn exactly how to take your drum programming to the next level. Before we go any farther though, I want to let you know that I've got a cheat sheet of all the Reason devices out there. So if you're a Reason user, you can go download that, and that will show you exactly how to choose and use which Reason device for which situation. It's really helpful. There's a link down below to get it. And like I said, you don't need to be a Reason user to do this. These programming tips will work in any DAW. I'm just happen to be using Reason right now. But these are fundamental drum programming tips. I have no processing on the drums besides just a master bus compressor and a limiter. So let's start with the simplest drum loop section over here. This is the basic drum pattern that I programmed in. I'm using something called the drum sequencer, which is basically a little drum programmer in Reason, and I'm using it to control Kong, which is just kind of like an MPC style sample player. Each of these has a sample loaded on it. But you could do any of this in a DAW like step sequencer. You could just write these notes out. I just think visually this is a really easy way to present it to you. So to start out, I just programmed a very simple beat. Really nothing fancy. It's not trying to be. So that's the basics, right? You just program in the beat that inspires you. Now, to spice it up a little bit, what you can do is double the important sounds, right? So let's mute them and bring them in one at a time. So first, this is the basic pattern. Now we've doubled the drums, so they hit a little harder. And when I say double, I should say I've used different samples, but complementary samples. These are just with the snare, you hear how when you start layering these on top of each other, this brings more low end, and this is bringing a little more thwap. So we've also kind of doubled the snare here. And the hi-hat. So just doubling already with good sound choices can make your song hit a lot harder and make your drums work just way better, because that way each sample can just be used exactly for what it's best at. When it comes to complementary tones, you want to think about, two things. First of all, covering the frequency range. Are you making sure that, your kick sample has like both a bottom to it and a sharp attack? Same with the snare. You're going to also want to think sort of from a transient perspective about, does the sample have enough transient energy versus enough of a tail? And you're going to want to pick things that are complementary. Now the next thing we do here is we're just going to add a little shuffle. Well, actually I did two things here. First, I panned out the complementary sounds. This will make them sound just a little bit better, so they're not sitting right on top of each other. So the hi-hat and the shaker are now panned a little bit, and same with the snare and clap. Like normally you want the snare right up the middle, but with two of these you can sort of widen it a little bit, and it will just make it sound a little fuller. So that's the first thing I did, and then I added just a little bit of shuffle to add more groove. You hear how that's just a little wider. And a little more groove from the shuffle. So if we turn the shuffle off, and the shuffle especially affects quick notes. The shorter the notes are in succession, the more you'll notice the shuffle. But I just sort of want a subtle amount of groove is what I'm adding here. Then the next step is to slide the timing of certain notes just to add even more groove. If you had if you're doing this in the sequencer, you would just sort of turn off snap to grid and manually drag, the hi-hats back or the clap forward a little bit. So let me show you what we're doing here. First, I'll just mute this and this for now. First with the hi-hats, what I did, and you can experiment whether you want to go one direction or the other. There's no right way. This is just the way you feel it. If you want them to push or pull the groove, you can slide them forward or backward. So let's listen to what that sounds like as I push them backwards. And this just sort of pulls it back a little bit. Subtle, but, or forward, it rushes it a little. And then just double that on the percussion. But, so both hi-hat copies are playing at the same time. They're both just pulled back to give a little more groove to it. A little more of an organic shuffle to enhance the shuffle. But with the clap, what I did is I pushed it forward, but I left the snare in its same place. And what you'll hear is this just creates a fatter sounding attack because their attacks don't quite line up as much, and it kind of creates more of a layered flam impact sound. So let's listen to the clap right now, and then I'll slide it back to its regular spot, and then we'll move on. And now back to its regular spot. And move forward. That's subtle, so let's... You hear how you can hear kind of two attacks? There they sound more like one. You don't want it to fully be two usually, but kind of like that clap. And in the context, it's just going to sound fatter. So already it sounds like, as opposed to, it's not only hits harder because of the layering and the panning and all of that, and the timing makes it groove more and be just a more infectious song. Now we go to the next version. And what did I do here? Well, in the first version of it, what I did was affect the pitches of these. Oh, no, sorry, that's the next one. Here we go. So what I've done here is address the volume of the instruments. So now if you look, I've affected the velocity of the hi-hats, of the claps, of the kick. And so this is going to add a whole other layer of groove that, like when you want to think about the groove, what are the beats that you want to be emphasizing? What are the ones that you want to be more subtle? Usually when notes come quickly in succession, they're not going to be at the same volume. So now this is what it sounds like with some volume, velocity programmed in. And this is what it sounds like without the velocity. And it just makes you groove a little bit more. It's all these subtle things that added up make for a much more infectious groove and a much more infectious drum programming. And that's why when you make beats, you want to really think about all these little things and how they add together. It's not like there's some silver bullet for making your drum sound great. It's adding all these things up, and then from there, doing all sorts of EQ and fun stuff from there. But you can see just how far we're already starting to come by better programming and sample selection. I'm also going to note that I added one more hit on this last backbeat because I decided I really wanted to emphasize it. So this is just sort of a thwack layered with the snare. And I've turned up so that the clap is the loudest on the back downbeat and quieter on the first downbeat. And I've kind of reversed that with the snare. So on each backbeat sounds a little different. Listen for that, and you'll hear how that also imparts a level of groove. Down, up. And so, we're just listening to the drum in isolation, but when you start combining this all together with other instrumentation, it really, really starts creating things that every other part of the song can feed off of, and it makes the world of difference. So, last but certainly not least, here we have a great trick. Plenty of samplers can do this. In Reason, the redrum can do it. I believe the EX24, whatever that is, in Logic can do it. A lot of different samplers have the ability to map velocity to pitch. What does that mean? Well, that basically means that the harder or the higher a velocity is for a note, basically the louder it is, it also will change the pitch of the note by a certain amount. Just like in real life, if you hit a snare drum softly, it's more of a dull sound. If you crack it, it's going to sound louder and higher in pitch. So we've already programmed in these velocity automations, which creates a lot of groove, but it's now we're going to add even another layer of groove on it by just basically going here and adjusting velocity to pitch, the setting, somewhere between like 10, 13%. I'll solo this out here just so you can kind of hear it, and I'll do an extreme setting, but so you hear how it's totally changing pitch. But we just sort of want it to be subtle, like, again, a game of inches. You could also have it mapped to decay. Louder it is, the longer it is, or shorter, and the amount that velocity settings affect volume. But now let's listen to this just in the context that we've now, I've basically done that on every channel. So let's see what that sounds like now. And just the sheer amount of extra groove is really phenomenal compared to where we started from. So let's just repeat the process. This is where we ended up. And this is where we started. So it's a world of difference. Let's repeat just for, for sake of learning. Let's repeat everything we just covered. And let me also remind you to download that Reason cheat sheet down at the free link below. And also let me know if you have any drum programming tips that I might have missed or skipped over. I'm always keen to learn other tips for making better beats in Reason or any other DAW. So just leave those comments down below. I cannot wait to hear what you guys come up with. So step 1, program the beat. Step 2, layer it with complementary sounds. Step 3, add a little bit of shuffle, pan the sounds, and step 4 is to slide the sounds around. Experiment with adding groove by pushing or pulling the hats or the kick or the snare. I mean, it's really, I always like to keep the snare on the grid but you don't have to. You can experiment to your heart's content, but slide them around and also kind of do the flam thing with the clap and snare. The next step is to automate the volume of the velocity of the hit so that they add additional groove that way. Also, I'm going to note that at one point here, I also now tweaked the pitches of the samples a little bit so that they were more complementary by just using the pitch. So the kick drum here now, I'll just play that real quick. Originally it sounded like this, but I wanted more of the thwack, so I bent it up a little bit. And then the last step is to use the velocity to pitch feature so that all the volume, velocity information that you put in will also shape the pitch of the samples, which will create even more groove. I really hope this has been a helpful lesson on how to make better beats, how to take your drum programming to the next level. I really appreciate any feedback you have on it. And thank you so much for watching, dude. Take care.